This is the Illuminate podcast, and I am your host, Rebecca Boatman. I am fascinated with human relationships, from going on first dates to understanding attachment styles and how our personal spiritual mission plays a big role in all of it. I created this podcast to invite you into conversations with inspiring leaders and I, as we explore different topics surrounding dating, relationships, money, and spirituality. Before we start, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. And my one ask, and a great way that you can contribute to the podcast, is to leave a 5-star review. And now let's jump in. All right, my friends, today's episode is all about boundaries. We need them. We need them to have healthy, thriving, flourishing relationships. And when we don't have them, we don't have the foundation to create real intimacy, to create safety, to create trust, to create respect. Someone who lacks boundaries usually feels resentful, feels very lonely, and struggles to create the relationship that they deeply desire, struggles in friendships. So what I find is that when you know how to have healthy boundaries and you implement them into your life, it positively impacts every single area of your life, and this massive amount of energy is called back to you. If you lack boundaries, you're losing energy. So imagine you have this beautiful bubble around you, and that bubble is a boundary. And so energy is able to circulate through your field. You're not losing it. Now, if you have no bubble and you don't know where that line is, where that boundary is between you and the outside world, between you and friendship and relationship, what happens is you're losing your energy. So a great way to identify where there's a potential boundary that gets to be created is looking at, where do you lose your energy? If you pause and reflect on, okay, where do I feel my energy dip and massively drop? That can be a great indicator as to where you can implement a healthy boundary to create a healthy sense of self. Now, this is something that I really struggled with. And let me tell you, my friends, if you can relate to that, it is a completely different, beautiful, expansive, wild, amazing life when you have boundaries. When you move from not having boundaries to having boundaries, because now I'm speaking to you from this place of having really healthy boundaries and knowing how to set them and to feel good in setting them. Where prior to knowing these tools that I am going to share with you, I really struggled with boundaries. I didn't know exactly where I should have boundaries, and I also didn't know how to communicate them. Okay, so there was a time when one of my primary caregivers would come to me often asking for money. And they were great at making money, but then would lose it, right? Would hit a rock bottom and need money and would come to me for money. So what would I do? I would give the money. But every time I would do this, and then I just wouldn't feel good. Like something in my system was like, man, like this doesn't feel good. And not only that, but I was learning how to have a new healthy relationship with money, one that was very different from what I was modeled. And so when they would also come to me and they would share about money problems, about this or that, it was like this way, this consciousness, this way of thinking of being that I was really wanting to graduate out of. I was really wanting to move beyond. So I knew, I'm like, man, I need to set a boundary around money with this person and who I love so much. And I struggled with mustering up the courage to do it. And I knew, I'm like, okay, what I need to do is say, listen, I am done having any sort of money conversations with you. I'm not available to talk about money with you, and I'm no longer lending you money. And I knew that I needed to do that, but I was struggling because I love this person so deeply, right? And I didn't want to hurt them. So what did I do? I mustered up the courage and made that phone call and said, listen, I'm unavailable to talk about money with you. And I'm also not going to lend you money anymore. And how did they receive that? They did not receive that well. And it was a very hard conversation. There was a lot of pain, different sensations in my tummy. And I realized in that moment, okay, this is where my personal struggle with creating boundaries comes from. Because when I advocate for myself, I'm experiencing anger, I'm experiencing blame, I'm experiencing this reaction that feels scary to my nervous system. And for the longest time, I unconsciously was avoiding that pain. I was avoiding those feelings. I was avoiding that reaction. But in avoiding those sensations, I was consistently self-neglecting every time I would do something that didn't actually feel good for my system. So in going in and having that hard conversation, I also realized something deeper. That is that I was afraid when I create this boundary, I'm afraid that you will think that I don't love you. Therefore, that brings up discomfort inside of me. So the growth opportunity right there, and this is what I want everyone to hear so clearly, is I can set a boundary and you may choose to interpret it as I don't love you, and that is up to you, because I can say no, and I know that I still love you, whether you choose to believe it or not. So my lack of boundaries in this area in particular, and in other areas, was a way to avoid the feeling of guilt. The feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't want to create this boundary and then feel guilty because you're hurting. When I actually just needed to create the boundary, sit with those sensations, allow them to be liberated, and learn, wow, it is powerful and safe and healthy to have these boundaries to support myself, because that is ultimately loving and taking care of my system, which is also loving you. It doesn't mean that I don't care for you. So a great way to distinguish this continuously and to support you is remember your intention. As you create boundaries, wherever you know you get to create them, remember your intention is to be loving to yourself and to others. So there's a big difference between flipping someone off because they cut you off, right, and wanting to hurt them, like wanting, right? There's a big difference between saying something very mean versus setting a boundary because you're taking care of yourself. Notice and distinguish the two different intentions. One is, okay, I'm advocating for my life. I'm advocating for my system. I'm advocating for a healthy sense of self. I'm taking care of myself. Versus an intention of, oh, I'm doing this because I actually want to hurt you. They're very different. So if you are new at setting boundaries and this comes up for you, you're like, oh, I don't want them to think X, Y, and Z. Come back to your intention. Why is it that you are creating this boundary? And ground deeply into that and let yourself move from that space. And now when I created this specific boundary with the money conversation with this primary caregiver, I had to remember that it is up to me to maintain and honor that boundary. So moving forward, anytime this person would attempt to cross that line, I'm not going to blame them, even though it's tempting, because I'm responsible for drawing in the line in the sand deep enough. So if anyone ever crosses a boundary, it's because we didn't draw the line in the sand deep enough. So to be specific, what would that sound like? The person brings up money. Hey, I'm unavailable to have that conversation. Unavailable. And holding that bar, that is up to me, that is up to you, whatever the boundary may be, we hold that bar, and then it transforms that relationship. And if someone is continuously not honoring the boundary, then that's where you pause and you look at, okay, am I willing to have a relationship with this person? And you reflect. And in healthy, high quality relationships, both parties will honor and respect the boundaries that are created. And boundaries don't equal loneliness. It's when we don't have boundaries that we feel lonely because we're not taking care of ourselves. So anchor in the value of boundaries by knowing, wow, when I honor myself, when I honor what is true for me, I actually feel so much closer to myself. Therefore, I'm able to feel closer to others. And in that particular experience that I shared with you around having a money boundary conversation, it 1,000,000,000% supported me in creating a whole new relationship with money that is expansive, that is flourishing, that is healthy. And I'm still a work in progress with money. My capacity to make it expanded massively after that conversation and other things that I shifted in my life to really support me. And right now I'm at that point of, okay, how do I really save a crap ton? Because I still will spend a lot. I'm a spender, you guys. I am a spender. Wow! So I need to bring on more experts in that area. Stay tuned for that. Now let's continue on boundaries. Now, what about boundaries in dating? So when I started to learn boundaries, here's what I would do. And I actually recommend this is when I would go on a first date, I would say prior to going on the date, I have 30 minutes. Let's do coffee or something, because I didn't want to go sit at a dinner for 2 hours with someone when I may or may not be interested in them. So I would let them know ahead of time, and I preferred it. And this may or may not be your jam, but it's also a way to practice boundaries. Hey, I'd love to meet you. I have 30 minutes. I'm down to meet for coffee. And I would go, and if I was interested in the person, I'd say, hey, I have more time. I can hang longer. So then I would sit and talk with the person longer. So you can have a boundary, and then you can also shift it. And with saying I only have 30 minutes, I don't have to explain. I don't have to share why. I can just know that that's what I'm available for. So remember, you don't have to explain your boundaries as well. And people who have a healthy relationship with boundaries as well are going to easily respect yours. Okay, so let's talk about if there's a dynamic in your life and you want to create a new boundary, and maybe you're like, oh my gosh, but I've never been this way. And I've always done this. So what about, that's what they're used to, yada, yada. Here's what you can do is you can acknowledge, hey, Susie or Frank or whoever the person is, I understand that for the longest time I have done X or I have been available for Y. And I realize that that is no longer in alignment for me. And I'm sorry if this is confusing. And this is what I am available for, or this is what I need moving forward. So therefore, you are acknowledging what has been, you are apologizing, and you are sharing what you are available for moving forward. Another great opportunity to create boundaries in dating is in dating multiple people. So this is something that I highly recommend, and we go deeper to inside of my membership, Meet the Frequency, and I'll touch on it here. So when I say date multiple people, I mean go out and get coffee. I mean get dinner. I'm not saying be physically intimate with all these people. And there is a reason why we share the benefits of not doing that. And we talk about that inside of the membership. And we're not saying, hey, physical intimacy is bad or anything. It's that when we're physically intimate, oxytocin comes out, and oxytocin is the bonding agent. Therefore, we're no longer seeing the person in front of us objectively. And for my listeners who desire a committed long-term partnership, of course you want to see the person objectively because you want to get to know them on many different levels, okay? So there's massive benefits to waiting to be physically intimate. And inside the membership, we also share how to communicate that and set yourself up to win. And right now in this episode, what I want to talk about is the boundary piece around this. So for example, when I was single and dating, I was dating, I believe, 3 guys, and they're all amazing, right? Just talking with them, getting to know them. And one of them was also my now partner. And now he, my now partner, was ready to enter into relationships sooner than I was. And he expressed that to me like, hey, I only want to see you. And he wanted me to only see him. Now, when I checked in with myself, I was not ready for that. I was not ready to get into partnership. So I had an option there. I can either prematurely enter this relationship because it's what he desires, or I can say, hey, I love that and I'm not ready for that. I'm still wanting to date and I'm committed to this vision of what it is that I wanted to create. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to move forward with him, right? Even though now I'm with him and he's amazing, but I had to honor that. And when I shared that boundary with him, how do you think he responded? He didn't prefer it, right? It wasn't what he desired, yet it was important that I was in integrity with myself and that I expressed that with him. So that is a boundary in that moment that I was invited into expressing. Now, down the line, I decided, okay, I only want to see him, right? So dating is such a great opportunity to communicate and to practice boundaries that support you. And of course, in that particular instance, when I expressed that, it was hard for him and it was uncomfortable for me to be with those sensations of, oh my gosh, I don't want to hurt this person. And I also knew if I self-neglect based on solely what he wants right now, that's a lose-lose for everyone. So remember that. Wow, there's so much. I'm getting nitty-gritty with it because I want to support you in the best way possible. Remember this: intimacy, trust, respect, and love follow boundaries. The person who has very healthy boundaries and a healthy sense of self has healthy relationships as it relates to those things, be it money, be it romance, be it friendships. And it is your ability to trust yourself to create boundaries that also allows the feminine in you to come out. Because another part of attracting your dream partner is going out and flirting, is smiling, is open body language, is being available and approachable. So when you trust yourself to create boundaries when you need them, it allows a whole new level of your feminine side to come out. Because the person who doesn't trust herself to say no and to create boundaries isn't going to fully unleash the feminine in her, because she doesn't trust that when she needs to say no, she'll say no. We talk more about this inside the membership, specifically under the Start Magnetic Dating module, because you want to be able to say, hey, no, thank you, or hey, I'm unavailable. Because then you will allow yourself to be open and available and cast a wide net. We call it sprinkling your magic dust. Because when you sprinkle your magic dust and you flirt, you wink, you're open, you're casting this massive net to then basically allow the perfect fish, aka your ideal partner, to find you, to know that you're open and available. So you want to have the skills to say no when you need to. You want to know that you can trust yourself to set boundaries when you need to. Because flirting is actually inviting in the unpredictable. When you flirt or you're open and available, you're essentially out of control, because you're saying, hey, I'm open for a conversation, and they may or may not come towards you, come talk to you. So what do people do when they're scared? They stay in control. They have their head down. They're not available to talk to them, for people to approach them. It's a safety mechanism. And for my listeners who are like, okay, I want to attract an amazing partner. Well, this is part of it. We go from flirting to dating to courting to commitment. So, and what's really cool is that inside of each step, there's an opportunity to practice boundaries. There's an opportunity to deepen and healthy boundaries that then also supports your relationship, your long-term partnership, and of course, all the relationships in your life now. I hope that everything I shared inside this episode made a difference for you, that there's at least one takeaway that you can then implement into your life to create movement, to create a healthy boundary to support you in your relationships. And if you would like help uncovering the areas of your life where you know you have loose boundaries and or where you actually have rigid boundaries. So rigid boundaries is when you have too many or they're very strong and it's actually out of fear, which then stops you from experiencing the closeness with a man or with someone that you desire. You want to uncover those as well and actually relinquish those boundaries to support the relationship that you want. So there's loose boundaries and there's rigid boundaries. And if you want help uncovering exactly what those are for you, and then peeling back the layers to getting to, okay, what is a tangible boundary for me that I can implement that would make a big difference and doing it, then I highly recommend jumping inside of my membership and doing the workshop specifically called The Frequency of Boundaries. And you can use code ILLUMINATE for $20 off your membership. And I encourage everyone to not only listen to the golden nuggets inside of these episodes, but to also implement them into your life, to also do the brave thing. And remember the story that I shared, it was not comfortable for me to create that boundary with my family member. It was uncomfortable, but the mystery benefits and everything that came afterwards was 1000% worth it. So bravery doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it is always worth it. So I am cheering you guys on. I am rooting you on, and I hope you have a beautiful, amazing, incredible day. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and you can find a ton more free tips on my Instagram under Rebecca Boatman. If you are curious about my online membership and community, you can click the link that is in the description and see the page that explains everything you get to support you on your journey to attracting and building a healthy relationship. And I hope to see you inside.